I mean, and how awesome is this? You actually get to get credit for listening on how to make more money. I can't think of a better way to get credits than that. So thank you for hosting this webinar. Thank you to all my friends who are listening. And if you are a consultant and you're listening to this, you're officially one of my friends. So thank you. This Same Rain Bigger Drops presentation is probably, I mean, maybe the most popular, certainly one of the most popular presentations and training sessions that I give. I presented this now to thousands of consultants in firms ranging from solo shops to firms with thousands and thousands of consultants. And that's because increasing the amount of money you make while you decrease your labor intensity is pretty much the goal of every consultant. So before I really dive in, let me just set a couple of expectations. First expectation I'll set by quoting Samuel Johnson, who I love the stuff he had to say. And one thing he said was, people more often need to be reminded than educated. So more often, people need to be reminded than educated. And a lot of what I'll be showing today is definitely reminding, not educating. Because the people on this call are smart. I mean, you know the business. And so some of this will be encouragement to actually start implementing best practices you already know. And of course, some of it is doubtless going to be new also. The second expectation I want to set is that we're really just scratching the surface of this topic today. I teach this Same Rain Bigger Drops as a full-day course. But even though I'm just going to scratch the surface, we will definitely be hitting very practical, very tactical tips that you can apply immediately to improve your business. The third expectation is less of an expectation than a request, which is submit questions. This is typically live and interactive. Today, the way we'll make it interactive is if you submit questions, and we'll get to those towards the end. So with those expectations set, we'll jump in. We'll figuratively jump in, which is a good reminder of a great metaphor. When I was a kid, my father was brimming with great advice about jumping. For instance, he used to say this particular gem to me. He would say, David, when I say jump, you should say, how high? That was his big lesson to me, how high. And that lesson's actually really relevant here, because as consultants and as leaders of consulting firms, we all know we need to generate new business. That's our jump. Our jump is generating business. We have either managers or senior partners encouraging us to bring in revenue or giving us incentives to generate clients. Maybe they're even threatening us if we don't bring in business. Or we ourselves are the leadership of the firm or the owner of the firm, and we know that to keep our firms growing, to keep them thriving, keep them alive, we need to bring in clients. So that's our jump. That's what we need to strive for. And there are plenty of sessions and programs and webinars that teach you how to jump, how to go after new business. And today's session, though, is a little different, because we're going to talk about, or at least start to talk about, is how you make each jump higher. So while other programs tell you how to make rain, this is really about taking that same rain and making bigger drops from each raindrop. As I mentioned a little bit earlier, my business is two sides. One side is helping consulting companies like yours, if you're listening, to sell more projects to more clients at higher fees. And the other side of my business, the Ascending Consortium, is all about selling consulting services to corporate clients. So companies come to me and they'll say, someone came just a week or so ago and said, we need help getting a product through the FDA. That's fine. People say, can you help us figure out what market to go in or how we get more cars in a rail yard? I may talk about that project, all sorts of things. And then I get them the right consultants. And because I advise corporations on what consultants to use, and because I spend my days selling consulting services and helping other firms sell consulting services, I have a lot of experience and understanding of why clients choose what they choose and how they buy and why they pay what they pay. So I'll give you a couple of examples of what I mean by same rain, bigger drops, or a higher jump. And by the way, just to stay within regulatory guidelines, the fees I'm going to give you will be, they're not the real fees. I'm going to adjust them slightly, but they'll be very close to what really happened. So for example, I called, and he said he was looking for a group to increase the skill set of his sales force. It was a fairly small company out in the Midwest, and he said he had a traditional sales force. He wanted to get them kind of thinking in new ways. And when he called, he said he'd already called a number of folks, and he'd pretty well chosen who he wanted to use. He said he had, I think the words he used was locked in. And based on talking to various companies, he'd set aside a budget of around $25,000. So there's the situation. The prospect's called. He already has another consultant identified. So essentially, there's an incumbent, and he has a budget, and that budget's $25,000. Now, this client actually signed the project with us for $95,000. And that was just the first stage of a $175,000 effort. It's 5 to 95. That's bigger rain. That's a bigger jump. Here's another example, and I just mentioned this earlier. A large chemical manufacturer that has a plant out in Wyoming called because they had a bottleneck in their facility, which was limiting their throughput. So basically, they were at this sold-out market situation. Every ounce of product that they could get through the plant, they could sell. And any bottleneck, any crimp, cost them money. And in this case, the bottleneck was the number of cars they could fit in their rail yard. If they could get more rail cars through, they could ship more product and they'd make more money. And he wanted to know whether I had anyone in my group who could solve this problem. And so no problem. So we brought in the right consultant and we figured out how to achieve the outcome he wanted, and we put together an approach and a proposal. And after I'd worked out those details with the consultant, I asked the particular consultant who would be working on this, how much would you typically charge for a project like this? And he said, about $125,000. Well, we did that project for $495,000, over 3 times as much. 125 to 495, that's a bigger jump. And here's the thing, no extra work involved. Client was delighted to pay that $495,000. Absolutely pleased his punch. And also, I'm just looking to see if questions come up. Someone asked whether there's slides, and the answer to that is there are, and we'll get to them. I don't use a lot of slides, but I will present and go through, so you're seeing what you're supposed to be seeing. So those are just a couple of examples. And you can think of your own projects. And what would it be like to sell something for 20% more or 50% more or double? And the question is how you do that. What can push a project from $25,000 to $95,000 or from $125,000 to $495,000? And the first question I'd ask you to think about is what's stopping you from getting the higher fees? What do you think the obstacles are to bigger drops? And when I present this in a live setting, what I typically hear